morning about saying this lesson is just such a great lesson. We decided to present it and have a conversation with this. And I'll say more about him before he speaks in our worship service. So I'm here all the time.
Well, good morning, everybody. You gotta test that volume. That is good. I know you can hear me. I haven't even started yelling yet. That's going to be something. All right. That's good. That's good. It's good. It's good to be here. I will say this. I mentioned I think this morning to the porters, like I just landed. I got in and I text home and say, hey, I'm here, and my wife right away is like, I just so wish I was there with you. And she'd really wanted to be out here and to meet all of you and to spend this time together, of course, with folks we know and love. But it just kind of reminds you of the way it works as a Christian anyway. And Paul actually writes this way, I'm not with you in person, but I'm with you in spirit. And that's not something everybody has the advantage to do. And so today is a special day for Christians everywhere as we come together, remember the Lord and what He's done for us. And I'm just excited to get to be here with all of you, to meet some of you and share this time together. Chip did just mention, I just want to make sure this comes across the right way. He said that I thought this was a really good lesson. I don't know that I said that exactly. Look, this is an okay lesson. No, I told you, and Barry gets this too. When you're preaching, and you're preaching every week, and there's very few times you really get to sit down on something and really fine tune it and look at it again, do it a second time. Do you know the looks I would get if I did something a second time where I'm at? Like that'd be the end of a career. So over the course of several years, the lessons that I'm going to be sharing with you today are lessons that I've really had some time to think about and to sit on. And honestly, everywhere I've been, I feel like these are messages that we all need. So whether it's a good lesson or not, that'll be up to you to decide. But I think it's a valuable principle that we're going to be looking at. We're going to look at the grace, probably better put the discipline of encouragement. And I'll mention that kind of more to start off the next hour. But before we kind of just jump into what encouragement really looks like for the Christian, I think we're going to start now with the atmosphere of that, where that comes from. It comes from the larger setting of love. And the reality that as Christians, we don't love like people naturally love. What we've been asked and tasked to do in terms of loving one another comes from a unique source. And so I want to look into that this morning as we kind of start out together. If you want to open your Bibles, the text I'll kind of get the bulk of the lesson from is Matthew chapter 5, teachings of the Lord from the Sermon on the Mount. About verse 38 is where we'll start. I'll get there in a little bit. I do want to say this. I just kind of start out with a little story. We in this new way to love, that shows up a lot in parenting. And about 3 months ago, my wife and I had the chance to teach a parenting class. We had friends that we'd worshiped with in California who had called and said, hey, you remember that class we did? We'd love to do that again. They're now in Texas. We're in Colorado. And thanks to the internet and all the things we're able to do, we've actually kind of been able to sign in with these 12 couples every week and talk about parenting. And, you know, with our kids getting older and most of them now out of the house and the last one going here in August, it's just such a fun thing to look back on. I remember how tired we were and just exhausted and yet how exciting it all is. And that's kind of what's come out of this class for me. Taking care of tiny people 24/7 is exhausting. And to all of you with little kids, I just want you to know, I heard this quote and I loved it. It is the hardest job you'll ever love. And you will miss it when you're not doing it. And that's why grandparents have such a great time. They get to watch your kids struggle with all that. So anyway, I thought to all the young moms out there, I wanted to start with this little story, or not story, but just a kind of little motto. You know you're a mom. You know you're a mom if being alone in your car is the most exciting part of your day. If all you want for your birthday is for people to not get a new glass out every time they want a cup of water. If going to work feels like vacation and going on vacation feels like work, you know you're a mom if you consider a permanent marker a weapon of mass destruction. If you understand on a meta level why Mama Bear's porridge was always too cold. And you know your mom if you take a lot of trash talk from little people who can't even get their shoes on the right feet. So like, you get the sensation of that, right? All right, so what comes into all of this is the idea of giving yourself a little grace. Like, we all want to be the better version of us, and we need to thank God for grace. And so to you moms who might be feeling a little stressed, a little bit kind of, on edge, I want to share with you something from my childhood. I was remembering the movie E.T., which I can't suggest to kids today. But anyway, as a kid, I watched E.T. And you got to know this. In that movie, and it's too old for it to be a spoiler, that mom was unaware that an alien was living in her daughter's closet for like over a week, just not even aware. And so at the very least, wherever you're at in parenting, you're doing better than that mom. So let's get into this story and kind of consider what love looks like. Christians all have a love story, that God found them and saved them and puts us on this new path. I want to point out to you that a lot of times Christians are a little weary about sharing our story because we don't think it's a big story or an exciting story or an adventure story. Like, there are people out there with some incredible stories. I want to say to you right now, never downplay the importance of learning the gospel in a godly home. That's not a dull story. That's not an unimportant story. In fact, if you think about it, what did Paul tell Timothy? As Timothy's seeking to find courage to keep doing the work that God has set him out to do, Paul says to Timothy, I want you to remember who shared these scriptures with you, who put you on this path to becoming a disciple in the first place. And who was it? It was his mother and his grandmother. You see, many of us can say that's our story. We were put on this path to following Jesus by the family that God gave us. And discipleship, ideally, will start in the home. That's the way God would like for this to be. And so what happens then is that begins in the home, where we're learning to follow Jesus, and then the church comes alongside that home and helps raise up the next generation of disciples. And after all, that's why we're here. We are here to make and grow followers of Jesus Christ. And we do this together by being with Jesus. We do it together by becoming like Jesus. And we do it together by learning to do what Jesus did. And so what happens in all of this is Jesus has made us a new person. We believe that the Bible teaches that when you unite with the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ in baptism, that what Jesus does there is he makes you a new person. You are a new you. The old life is put to death. That is the beginning of a journey that lasts the rest of our life. And so you see, in this new life, it isn't just about learning to like Jesus. It's learning to become like Jesus. That's truly what makes us brand new. And the Bible says you've been raised with Jesus, and so what you ought to do is live a new kind of life. And we become apprentices of our rabbi, doing what he did, living like he lived. And a part of being an apprentice of Jesus Christ, the evidence at least that we see that we're being transformed, is learning to love in a whole new way. And that's what Jesus teaches us. Valentine's Day came up not long ago, and I just had this thought. It's like, there sure are a lot of love songs out there, right? I mean, you look it up. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of love songs out there. And as I was kind of thinking about it, I did a little search, because the truth is there's not very many good ones. And so I thought, I wonder what are rated, like the top love songs. And so I got in there, like right near the top was I Will Always Love You. And again, I just want to make the point, all these love songs tell me that at least human beings, they think the concept of love is important. Otherwise, why all these songs? And so I Will Always Love You is out there. Of course, Whitney Houston made it famous. We all know Dolly Parton wrote it. I don't want any comments about that later. What about the song I Want to Know What Love Is? That was right up there near the top. Maybe it's the era I grew up in, but Foreigner did a great job teaching an important concept. I want to know what love is, right? If you're looking in the right place, that's a powerful song. Endless Love, Diana Ross, Lionel Richie, Smooth. And of course, you can't get away with the top four without Unchained Melody by the Righteous Brothers. Now look, think about this quest for finding out what love is, for knowing what love is. This is what we're on, but here's what I think about humanity. We are better at singing about love than we are actually understanding and living out this love. And here's why. You cannot give what you do not have. And only the new you, born again in Jesus Christ, now has the power to live out a new way of loving. The new you has resurrection power to love in a way that is unnatural to the old you. You can't do it in your own strength, in your own will, or your own way. In fact, if you're trying to love like Jesus loved and you're not born again in Jesus Christ, it's a lot like trying to water ski behind a kayak, right? Like you're not getting your head above water. It's not going to work. But the new you has this supernatural power given by God to help us. And so here's your main idea this morning I want you to think about. The new you is called to love differently. And the new birth gives you the capacity to do that. So it all begins with being in Christ Jesus. Listen to what Jesus says in John 15 at verse 5. He says, I am the vine. You are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him, he bears much fruit. But pay attention. Apart from me, you can do nothing. It doesn't say, apart from me, you can't try to do something. We all try to do stuff without him. The truth is, you will not bear the fruit of Christ if you're not in Christ, is what Jesus is hitting at there. Disconnected from Christ, leaning on our own strength, we will never be the people of love that Jesus wants us to be. But connected to Christ, we begin to bear this fruit. Well, what does that fruit look like? I'm glad you asked, because we hear about this in Galatians 5, verse 22. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. It shows up in certain ways. I want you to think about that list. Isn't that list ultimately just attributes or expressions of love? It starts with love, but all those things kind of fit into this new way that Jesus has led us into. In fact, 1 Corinthians 13, if you read this not just as a wedding passage, you start to see what this new way of love really is. It is patient. It is kind. It is not jealous. When Jesus' life is abiding in you, you are being transformed into this new way. And the difference between old me and the new me is the outpouring of love produced by the indwelling of Jesus' Spirit. In fact, that's what Paul says in Romans 5, verse 5. The love of God has been poured out within our hearts through the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, whom was given to us. God pours himself into us so it overflows and spills on to others. And so Jesus makes it very clear to all his followers, if we follow him, if we seek to become like him, if his life is flowing through us, we will learn this new way to love. And we don't love like those around us. It's a completely countercultural way to love. It is a heavenly love. It is his love, and it's lived out through us. Now, these two ways, the old way and the new way of loving, are contrasted in the Sermon on the Mount. And that's what I want to kind of use as our main text. I'm going to read this with you, and then we'll look at some ways that this really does change us. So if you want to look at Matthew 5, I'm going to read verse 38 through 48, and we'll kind of just stick on that text here this morning. Jesus preaching says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him have your coat also. Whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks of you, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. You've heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? If you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Therefore," and here's your standard of love, "you are to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect." Can you see it? Jesus wants his followers to practice this new way of love in an old you world. And so I want to just look at some of the differences that this creates. And the first is this new way of loving is ultimately, limitless. It just is so different than our old way of life. And the old way of life was really, of loving, was just an exchange. And I'll explain that here in a second. I think this makes pretty good sense. The old you loved as a bit of an exchange. And so when Jesus says, look, I want you to get rid of this eye for an eye mindset. He's talking about this exchange kind of love we've fallen into. When we live in an eye for an eye world, all we're doing is returning good or bad based on what we received. And while if you got good and you return good, that seems good, the truth is you don't always get good. You're giving an eye for an eye, and if you get bad, you return bad. You just give back whatever you get. It makes me think of the story of a couple who were lying in their bed, and it was summer, the windows were kind of cracked, and this dog in their neighbor's backyard was just barking and barking. And it was driving them crazy. A week went by, and this dog's still in his neighbor's backyard just barking. And their backyards were back to back, and so the husband, a week in, says, that's it, jumps out of bed, middle of the night, I'm going to take care of this situation. And he runs out of the room, and he comes back in. He's only gone a couple of minutes, and his wife's like, well, what'd you do? And she can hear the dog barking still just as loud. What'd you do? He said, I went and put that guy's dog in our backyard. We'll see how he likes it. All right. That's exchange love. That's what we fall into. When we just give what we get, it doesn't make our lives any better. Let me just ask you, how's that working out for you? It doesn't work. The old way won't change anything. It just exchanges. And honestly, it gets worse and worse. It's always limited, by the way, to some degree by our own impurities, by our own morality. Like, we need a new way to love. That old way just doesn't work. It says, I'll give you love because I want you to give me something in return. You ever thought about how temperamental sports fans are? I think the term fanatics is really descriptive and really apropos. A city can hate an individual that's not on their team. I think about Dennis Rodman for this because the whole world hated Dennis Rodman at one point except for the Detroit Pistons fans. They loved him. And if you were in Chicago, you really hated him because there were 3 conference championships in a row that Detroit kept the Bulls out of. But you know what happened? All of a sudden, Dennis Rodman goes and plays for the Bulls and helps them win 3 titles. And Chicago loves a guy that they hated before. What happened? They got what they wanted. And they will love you if you give them what they want. But if you don't, you'll be hated. And this is the way the old way works. I love you some because ultimately I love me more. And Jesus says, don't give yourself a lot of credit for that way of loving because it doesn't take a lot of effort. It's just so easy for us to love that way. It's not a love from above. Because God's love is limitless. It's impartial. We have been born again. We've been given a new heart filled with God's love. And the old way was a love that said, I will love you if. But the new way says, I'll love you even if. Let me just tell you right now, that has power. No matter what, the standard between us is I love you. Friend, foe, I love you. I get a benefit or a cost. I love you. Well, how can you do that? Because God loved us. It's a source more powerful than anything we ever had before. The old you says, I love you if. Here are the terms. Here's what I expect back. It's almost a contract kind of love. The new you says, I'm going to love you even if, because my love now flows from a source so powerful, so deep, it can never be exhausted. And we see it on the cross. That's how Jesus loved us. I'm not going to love you based on any return on investment. And let me just say, that is a reckless love. But it is not useless. I want you to think about something. The night before he died, Jesus took off a towel from around his waist, started to wash and dry the feet of his disciples. Now, I know you all know this story, so this doesn't come as a shock to you, but even the dirty, rotten traitor Judas passes through that line. Jesus washed the feet of the man who would betray him. I'm going to ask you a question. Was that a waste of Jesus' time? Was it a foolish use of energy that he had so little left of to spend in this world? No. That was limitless love powered by God. And when you use limitless love to love others here, it is love offered to God. Not just Judas received that. God was revered in that offering of love. And limitless love, here's the real picture, looks like God. That's when the world sees us and says, oh, this is different. This comes from something different. And so while the old way to love is more of a trade, sometimes a barter, the new way is a trust. I don't know how this will end, but I know I owe you love. And this is what Jesus is teaching here. That's a difference that it'll make. I'm going to trust and give to God what was shown to me. And another big difference is that the old love is limited in a way that it flounders. Oh, I went too far. Limited, and the new way reaches. There we go. The old love ends. That old way, it just can't continue. It'll hit a wall at some point. But the new way of love, if you really take on this heart of Christ, it will stretch you, and that doesn't stop. It stretches you, and it stretches you, and it stretches you. See, the old you was limited. It was only going to get so far. I'll give you my shirt. I'm not going to give you my coat. I'll do something, but I can't do it. I'll go the mile, but a second? No, that time is mine. I'll love my friend, but don't ask me to love my enemy. Now, I want to put all that in your mind so that the text that we read, those who first heard Jesus teach this, they would have understood exactly what he was saying a little bit better than we do in our modern ear. And I'll show you why they understood this metaphor so well. They lived in a land that had been conquered. It was being ruled over. Like foreigners were now your bosses at your home. Think about how awful that would feel. They were occupied by Rome, and you couldn't go a day without seeing some Roman somewhere in your town, and you hated that. They didn't belong there, and they certainly didn't make you feel comfortable there. They represented everything you despised. But Rome had a law, because you were, by the way, conquered. If one of our soldiers is coming by and he needs help carrying a load, you'll take it, and you'll take it a mile. That's a law. You're going to follow that law. Well, what we've learned in history and understanding that time period is there were certain Jewish people that were very serious about this. And so they would go to the outside of their house by their door, and they would step off a mile, and they'd set a stone there, just in case they were asked to carry that soldier's stuff a mile, and they would carry it. And they would get to that stone and they would throw it on the ground and say, I'm not going one step more. I've fulfilled that law. They knew exactly what Jesus was talking about here. He's saying, you're going to have to stretch yourself. You're going to have to get uncomfortable with what you think this is all about. They knew exactly what he was saying. Here's what this looks like. Go further than you have to. You got kids? Start teaching them this. Here's the requirement. Go beyond it. This is the love of Jesus. Go beyond what you're obligated to do. What do you get from the master when you've done all that you were told to do? Great, that's what you were told to do. Go beyond. Go further. Love that comes from the flesh only seeks to give people what they deserve. And by the way, that's why this world is so messed up. None of us deserve anything. And that's what we're giving each other. But love that comes from the Spirit seeks to give people what they truly need. And we need more of God. We need more of His love. Look at verse 45. This is the way God sees this. See, we've got the good guys and the bad guys, the ones on our side and the ones on the other side, the occupiers and the freedom speakers. God says unrighteous people need as much sun and rain as righteous people do. And so I'm going to give it to both. I'm going to just love both. God doesn't love people because of who they are. God loves people because of who He is. And that's the calling. Because of who God is, we will love All. When you're born of God, you're no longer slaves to loving with qualifiers, you know? Think about this. One of the most eye-catching differences in the first Christians. The ancient world, up to that point in history, had never seen a community that stretched themselves and reached out to love like this new community of Christians did. It changed the world. And I want to put this into some context. I'm kind of passionate about this. I don't think that the modern day Christian really understands this. Because we have been living in a world influenced by the love of Jesus for the past 2,000 years. And so we just assume this is the way things always were. But I'm telling you, the way Jesus loved radically shifted the way people loved one another. And even the fingerprints of that through history have changed the world. So let's go back to the beginning. The new set of believers, the Christians, they reached so far in their love. What they did is they reached out to the worst of sinners, that there was no religion on earth that said, hey, come on in here. They said, no, we want to love you. Those new Christians reached past ethnic lines and included people of different backgrounds into this family. They did things that nobody had ever done and the world had never seen, and they did it because they'd been loved by Jesus in a way that radically shifted the way they saw the world. But probably the most earth-shattering thing these new Christians did was the way they treated women and children. And again, you're thinking, well, no, what's the problem with that? We're doing pretty good. Yeah, we are. Thank God for Jesus changing the way we see things. Because here's how it was. Imagine a world that was obsessed with sex but not with procreation. That's the ancient world. A world where girls were forced to marry before puberty, not for their good, but because men were greedy for sex. And by the way, a world where abortion and infanticide was not only encouraged, it was oftentimes enforced, which left the unwilling mother oftentimes sterile, many times dead. Little girls, if they were not useful in the terms of that ancient culture, were often taken and just set aside a dump and left to die, exposed. Some would gather them and force them into prostitution. This is why in the ancient world, and you can see these numbers, there were 140 adult men to 100 women. And if you're looking for where that is in our modern world, it's just right about 50-50. It was a man-dominated world. And then this little weird religious group comes along and says, we're not doing things like this anymore. And they begin to treat women and children with equal dignity as creations of one creator God. You know what those Christians did? They did something that the world never did because the world didn't see women and children as worth it. But those new Christians that came onto the scene, they didn't force little girls to marry. In fact, they said to women, you don't have to marry if that's not something that's in your path to do. And they'd go out to those dumps and they'd collect those little girls and they would adopt them into their family and raise them with love and the fear of God. And they did something else that was absolutely radical. They insisted that men should be as sexually faithful as women, and that sex belonged in a marriage between a man and a woman. And they taught that divorce, that's not something we throw around and act like it's nothing. That's a big thing. We need to really consider ways to avoid that. And you couldn't just dump your wife because you found somebody new that you wanted to put all your time into. That was a new way. Now, that may not sound so new to you today. I'm telling you, it changed the world. History shows us something I think is really interesting. They've done excavations in first century burial grounds. And they've looked at carvings on caskets or tombstones and inscriptions that were left behind in catacombs. And what they found is, if that inscription anywhere praised a child or a woman, that's a Christian catacomb. That's a Christian tombstone. That was new. That wasn't happening in the world before then. See, the biggest number of inscriptions that honor women as mothers We're Christians. We just feel like women are equal and motherhood is noble, and that's the way it's always been. I'm telling you, it wasn't. Christians brought that idea into the world through the love of Jesus Christ, and it has changed us ever since. It is a new way. They stretched to love in ways that the world had never seen. And I got to tell you, I am so proud that that's our heritage. We're a part of that because of Jesus Christ. Now we love this way too. And so Jesus then says, hey, look, if you're proud to be there, let me tell you, it goes even further. I want you to pray for your enemies. Do we do that? You know, the best time to test that is any election season. Christian, be real. First, the fact that anyone on the other side of you politically is an enemy, shame on you. They're human beings made in the image of God, and we're just living here together. Show them love. And if you've got a real enemy, and you'll have real enemies, Jesus says you pray for them. You know, the problem is we don't enjoy praying for people that we don't enjoy. If I love you naturally, I'll pray for you all day long, but it's hard to pray for people that are hard to like. But if I don't pray for people that are hard to like, then I'm not being like the God I'm praying to, and we need to know that. This is what Jesus is asking us to do. He sends his Son to the good and the bad. The righteous and the wicked should have that ray of light, that love that comes from Jesus Christ. And so think about this. The new way love has got to come from the power of the Spirit, because you do not have the power in your own flesh to do it. It's not natural. It's stretched beyond who we are. The new way of loving, church, is reaching beyond where we're comfortable. And that's hard, because a lot of what we call church is just about being comfortable. But if the love of God is here, if Christ's love is among you, you will stretch and stretch and stretch, because that's what his love does. It's powered by his cross. And that's another real difference that this new love makes. The old love flounders. This new love, this is where winning happens. This is where conquering happens. I want you to think about this with me. The old way of love fails. The new way of love wins. And when I say fails, I don't mean like it just kind of runs out. I mean, as you apply it, it never achieves what you intend or want or it needs to achieve. It doesn't produce like it's supposed to. You know what happens when we keep living in an eye for an eye world, right? We all end up blind. It just doesn't work. That is the greatest difference between the old you life and the new you life. It's what you think actually works. Now, the old me thought a lot of different things would actually get the outcome I wanted, but I was wrong about that. What really works? What produces the you really want to be? What helps you come to that standard that you really ultimately look up to? What produces the kind of world you want to live in or raise children in? We start thinking about this in a new way, because the world is full of darkness and evil. You know, at one point, Peter was faced with evil. What was his way of dealing with that? He pulls out his sword. He swings, and that's the way I picture that. I don't think Peter tried to cut off an ear. I think he tried to cut off a head. But that old way swings that sword, and an ear falls to the ground, and Jesus sees that. What does Jesus do? He picks that ear up. I don't know why I picture him blowing on it, getting the dust off. He fixes it. Just, Peter, that's not the way. That's not love. Think how powerful that is. Jesus is teaching, bless the world. Pray for these people. He's being arrested. He's going to be killed. He says, no, we're going to bless this world. Put away your sword. He's showing us that you overcome evil with good. That grace is ultimately more powerful, that his love changes the way the world works. And we know that's the best way to work. We all know, if you're sitting here today, that the love of Christ is the best way to go, but that doesn't make it easy. To love people with such relentless grace that they can't help but ask, What makes you tick? How are you able to do that? Listen to Paul in Romans 12. Verse 14, he says, bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. I think the wording of that is pretty interesting. You can bless others, but if you're still cursing them, what's that do? Bless those who curse. Bless and do not curse, because the most natural thing inside of you is going to say, I want to get even. I want my pound of flesh. They're going to hear from me. Don't curse. Bless. And then he says in verse 17, never pay back evil for evil to anyone. Respect what is right in the sight of all men. If possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Never take your own revenge. That's what Jesus is talking about. Pray that God will bless them. Do things in such a way that everyone can see that you love in a way that's different than everyone else. Don't let evil conquer you. Conquer evil by doing good. The new you believes that a towel is more powerful than the sword. That bottom up is more powerful than top down. That we are charged to serve the world, not rule it. Show them the love of Jesus. You see, a lot of this is about deciding that we're actually willing to die for others, to give up our will that others might see the love of God. That's what our rabbi taught, and the truth is, if Jesus just taught it, it would have been powerful. But what he taught, he lived. And that's what makes what we're doing powerful. We're not just saying it. We're going to try to live this. And so at Calvary, Jesus walked the talk. And he demonstrated a new way to love. Jesus went the extra mile that day. And on that cross, he prayed for his enemies. A blessing for those he could have killed, but died on their behalf. You see, what's happening on that cross is not just something in memorial that we remember every first day of the week. It's the call to a new lifestyle. Jesus is trying to raise up our apprentice, or his apprentices, to raise them up like the rabbi, that we would be a cross-cultured people. That everything we do is now motivated by the love you cannot deny as seen on that cross. You could sum it up like this. The old way, love is a reaction. And let me tell you right now, you know if you're stuck there. If everything you do is just a constant reaction to things going on around, if you're there, that's the old way. You got to get away from that. The new way, here's where it is a reflection. Is Jesus coming out in the way you love? Stop reacting, start reflecting. When I lived in my old self, I was going through life just responding to what others did to me. But what happens in the new me is my life is now powered by a different source. The Spirit powers me. I'm trying to return in all that I do the love that God has given to me. God's love, as he looked at a broken and sin-cursed world, God's love would not allow him to do nothing. And so God's love is transforming us all into something. We are becoming people of divine love. I'll just share this story with you. I thought it was pretty interesting. I don't think you guys should know every famous doctor's name, and not every famous doctor should be famous. But do any of you know or recognize the name Dr. Henry Heimlich? I'm sure the last name gave him away. Dr. Henry Heimlich is in fact famous for the maneuver that you all know for helping choking people. It's credited for saving, at this point, hundreds of thousands of lives, which is pretty incredible. Here's a little story about Henry. In the later years of his life, he was living in an assisted living home, and at a meal in the general dining room, sure enough, the lady next to him begins to choke on her food. Well, she's sitting in the right place this day. Henry gets up, goes behind her, does the maneuver just like you've all been taught. Sure enough, food pops up and out. Her life is saved. Thank you, Dr. Henry Heimlich. Here's a little interesting fact about that. It was the first time he'd ever used it. He'd studied it. He'd written about it. He'd taught about it. He'd lectured on it. He'd theorized it. He had never practiced the thing that he taught all those years until that moment. And here's what I'm saying to all of you. Our witness to the world, it's not just about how good we are at singing love songs to God. Are we living it? Is this the way they're seeing us behave on a day-to-day basis? Or would the way you live be shocking to them if they heard you sing the songs you sing? Are we practicing the love that Christ has given us? Here's what I know. The love we're talking about today is going to take the power of God's Holy Spirit. We cannot will it. We cannot do it in our own strength, and it is so easy to drift back to the old way, isn't it? And the enemy is all over it. Constantly going to be taunting you and whispering to you, look, it's too hard to love like that anyway. And it's not working. It's not creating the change you hope it would create. But the new you can love in a new way. You may not want to, but don't tell me you can't. Dr. Christian Bernard, and I'm just going to end with this, was the first man to successfully do a heart transplant, which is quite an incredible thing when you think about it. And one of his first patients actually was a fellow doctor who was in dire need of a heart transplant. He performed the surgery. It went well. Just take everybody off edge. It went really well. And one day after recovery, this doctor friend walked into Bernard's office, and he said to his friend, hey, do you want to see your heart? And up on his shelf was a jar with his old heart in it. And for the first time in human history, this man was holding his own heart in his hands. And this is what he said. He said, so that's the old heart that was giving me so much trouble. Let me tell you, God has taken out your old heart and given you a new heart and filled it with his love and with his strength. And so what I'm saying is, you might be unwilling to push and stretch in this. Don't tell me you're not able. God has given you all the power you need to love this way. You can stop reacting to what people do. And you can return what God has done for you. The truth is, you are loved too much not to love a new way. And so that's your assignment for the class period today. I'm going to give you an assignment every lesson we have, and this is it. It's actually the simplest one in a lot of ways. Your job this week is to go spill out onto someone else what God has filled you with. That's it. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.